Okay, we're live.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our first curriculum subcommittee meeting of the year for the Weston Board of Education. Today is Tuesday, October 11th. We've got a really full agenda for the day, so some good, exciting topics to talk about. Tina, do you want to walk us through the agenda?
Sure. Okay, so Bernie and I met to prepare for the agenda, and we have some, we're joined today by some of our partners in the field that will help lead some of the topics on the agenda. We want to remind everyone the purpose of the committee meeting is to collaborate between the Board of Education stakeholders and the Weston Public Schools instructional leadership team to discuss all aspects of curriculum, instruction, school culture, and climate in the Weston Public Schools. As a reminder, our virtual norms, we want to make sure that our cameras are on at all times and that we are muted unless we are contributing to the conversation. Please be present and engaged, and make sure that when we are engaging in the conversation, we are seeking to understand. So by all means, we encourage questions to further engage in the discussion. And we want to make sure that our comments are on topic to the agenda. We want to make sure that we're very efficient and mindful of everyone's time. So we are going to be very poignant around the time allocation that we've given to each agenda item. And if we need to move an agenda item to the November meeting, we will do that. Is that good? All right. So Bernie, did you want to, introductions by you or by me? It doesn't matter.
Okay, I can do the Board of Ed introductions. So I'm Dr. Bernadette Kingsley. I am the Curriculum Committee Chair for the Board of Education. On the call as well right now, we have David Felton, and joining us very shortly from the Board of Ed, we have our chairperson, Melissa Walker.
Fantastic. And we have Superintendent Barbiero on the call. We have Principal Doak, Principal Falber. We have, I believe Principal Ward is here. My screen is small. And we have Principal Caddis on the call as well. And I also believe we have Tracy Edwards as well, the Director of Pupil Personnel Services. So do we need to approve last meeting's minutes?
Yeah, it looks like we have one set of minutes from a June 2022 meeting. So David, if you feel comfortable with the minutes, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion to approve the minutes from the June 2022 Curriculum Committee meeting.
And I second. So motion passes.
Fantastic. And we are ahead of schedule. This is looking good. So the next item on the agenda, when we started to kind of debrief around some updates around curriculum instruction and school culture and climate within the district, we wanted to provide a series of updates within certain areas of curriculum and instruction. And so I'm going to ask that Tracy kind of join the conversation within the first topic, which is a special education update around, she and I will do this collaboratively because we have some updates around the state literacy guidelines and the updates there, as well as some of the updates for dyslexia. So Tracy, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Good to see all of you. We had a parent meeting toward the end of September, which was, I think, a really productive and positive conversation. The September presentation really focused around kind of high-level overview of PPS special education within the district. We talked a lot about staffing primarily and what that looks like in each of the buildings and how different roles work together. We also gave kind of a preview of goals, although they will be discussed obviously in more detail during the upcoming Board of Education meeting. We have gotten some feedback about topics for the next meeting. I think you're all aware that we've transitioned to CT SEDS as our new IEP system. The entire state has. That will be the topic of conversation in the next parent meeting, which I know that we wanted a firm date today. It's tentatively on November 16th. There's a couple of other calendars being checked. I will certainly be communicating district-wide about that meeting. And we have a parent group that will also be helping us to get the word out about that, which is very much appreciated. CT SEDS will be the focus. I do think we'll talk a little bit also about the dyslexia guidelines, which might be a good segue. Tina, if you want to skip that first bullet, we can come back to it. I can talk a little bit about the update. Great. So in July of 2022, there were updated dyslexia guidelines released by the state of Connecticut. Again, this is a statewide change. It is not unique to Weston. Really what the state wants us to be looking at is the specific profile of our students who are identified under the eligibility category of dyslexia. And they've asked us to look at that through a slightly different lens moving forward. Basically, they've identified 3 specific reading profiles within these updated guidelines. One is specific word reading difficulties, so students who are specifically struggling with reading words on a page. The other being specific reading comprehension difficulties. So the opposite really of what I've described. Word reading isn't the area of challenge, but putting all of the pieces together and understanding the text that's being read is the area of difficulty for the student. And then the last category is what they're referring to as mixed reading difficulties, which, as you could probably guess, is a student who is presenting with a combination of the two, both difficulties with comprehension and also difficulties with word reading. These guidelines were released in July. They are in place, and they were in place really effective immediately. What has not changed is for families or staff members who are familiar with the IEP document, there are not additional boxes under the eligibility categories. So we still have specific learning disabilities or specific learning disabilities dyslexia. They have not broken down the 3 profiles on that MAID page. We are definitely taking a look at certainly this guidance in conjunction with the assessments that we're using as a district, and also talking, although we haven't gotten to all of the buildings yet just because of the schedule, but we're reviewing this guidance with staff in each of the buildings to make sure that we're all on the same page for initial eligibility meetings moving forward.
Quick question. How does the new state program differ from what we've currently been doing?
So I wouldn't necessarily consider this a program, although we are going to talk about programs in the literacy guidance moving forward. What's different is previously when we talked about eligibility under specific learning disabilities, we would talk about that broadly. And then we would discuss if a student met the guidelines for a specific learning disability, do they more specifically meet the guidelines for specific learning disabilities, dyslexia, although there's never been a separate checklist for that. This guidance is making us take one step beyond that. So we're talking about, does the child have a learning disability? If yes, is that learning disability dyslexia? If yes, what type of dyslexia is it? Is it about word reading? Is it about comprehension? Or is it about both of those things working in tandem? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Tracy, so I'm going to ask that we hold off on the literacy guidelines until we get to the district updates there too, because it's all coupled together on how we are responding as a district to those updates for literacy. And I'm just going to ask Tracy, do you want to then transition into some of the social emotional learning curriculum update that we talked in partnership with the PE Health and Counseling Partnership?
Yes. So our counseling curriculum is up for renewal during this school year. So you'll hear a little bit about this during the Board of Education meeting when we talk about district-wide priorities and goals. It has been several years since that's been updated and revised. There are changes that we need to make in terms of state expectations. And I would also add that there are changes that we need to make because of programming that's been introduced in the district since that last curriculum revision, meaning the last time we were talking about this curriculum, we were not implementing Ruler, we were not implementing DBT. And obviously programs and curriculum are two different things, but we want that to match and be more cohesive. So that will be an enormous undertaking for our mental health teams during the upcoming school year. Do you want me to go to the next part in terms of parent meetings? So another thing that we've been talking about, and I'm not ready to share dates just yet, we've done some large group sessions around mental health of our students over the last couple of years. And I think we want to take a slightly different approach this school year and try to have, we end up usually with a smaller group anyway, but with small group parent meetings to talk more specifically about some strategies. I think it makes the most sense to have a secondary approach and an elementary approach, again, because we're using two different programs. Basically, how I'm envisioning the first meeting, or if we need to have multiple rounds of the first meeting, I'd like to have some representation from the elementary level or the high school, middle school, high school level, depending on which meeting. And we'll step through the primary features of each of the programs that are being addressed, be it Ruler or DBT, and provide families with some strategies for using aspects of that program at home. What are some things that you can be doing to reinforce a skill or to help your child work through an area of difficulty or challenge? So more to come on that, but that is in the works. I'm anticipating that will be probably later in November than the special education meeting we were just talking about.
Yeah, and in full transparency, as we return to more of a normal state of an educational environment, and we recognize that social emotional learning and promoting resiliency and really supporting students to persevere and self-regulate, we don't think that we are not ignorant to the fact that we need to revisit some of these strategies with students in the classroom regularly, which then transitions and transfers to supporting our parents to kind of help transfer some of the learning that students do in the classroom and that we do with students in the classroom, but also supporting parents to transfer some of those skills and that language at home as well. So our goal is to really continue to be a partnership between parents and the school lessons that are happening on a regular basis, K through 12. And so when I approached Tracy, we kind of brainstormed some ideas relative to providing small group conversations and strategies for parents, both in November and then hopefully again at the end of the school year as well, to see some of how that work that we are doing in partnership with parents is actually supporting what's happening at home. And if we can gather any feedback on how we can do better as a district, that's what we're looking for as well. Okay. Any other questions for Tracy on her two areas?
I have a question.
Sure.
Tracy, the changes relative to dyslexia, is it going to result in changes to how the education is delivered insofar as resources? Are you envisioning any impact to the resources we might have to have for the students that fall into that area of needing additional help?
That's a great question. There is a need for professional development beyond what I was describing in terms of a district review of the new guidelines. I'll be honest, I don't think I'm saying that because there's some new guidance from the state. I think I'm saying that because there's a need for professional development around supporting students who have reading challenges. This guidance doesn't really change my opinion on that either way. that's something that's kind of been in the works regardless. I think it will be a little bit more refined because we're going to be looking more specifically at these areas, but these areas are also not new information. When we're talking about students with reading challenges, we have always historically been talking about difficulties with decoding, encoding, and comprehension.
Okay, so I think what you're saying is specific to the new state guidelines, you don't see an impact because of more students wouldn't necessarily qualify or fall under that umbrella, nor would less.
Correct. They are just falling. I don't anticipate that. I anticipate that they will be falling under the umbrella more specifically and differently, meaning there will be 3 ways to fall under that umbrella. But I do think that those students or students who meet any of those 3 profiles were discussed in terms of eligibility under specific learning disabilities, dyslexia previously.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great.
I had a quick question just about the update to the social emotional learning curriculum. What is the scope that we're talking about with curriculum? So is it K-12? Are we looking at particular grades? And is it something that reaches every student, or is it for pull-out groups?
Great question. The scope is everybody, which is why I said that this is an enormous undertaking for the district. And we're going to need to assess this as we start to work through it. We will be looking at all levels, but it might mean that we need to be doing some more focused work over time. But the vision is district-wide. And your question about, does this touch everyone? Yes, the counseling curriculum is really designed to capture what I'll just call very broadly, quote, classroom lessons. So especially at the elementary level, again, this looks different at the middle school and high school when we're talking about things like advisory. But we're talking about what are kind of the instructional opportunities from a social skills standpoint, a behavioral standpoint that we're providing to students within general education. And of course, that work is extended also in individual and small group sessions for students who qualify for that. But it's a broader picture.
Great, thank you.
All right, thanks, Tracy. So I'm actually going to move that the state literacy guidelines update down when we go to the district committee updates, because we only have one more update from out in the field. So Megan is here, from Principal Megan Ward from Weston High School. And we asked her to give us an update on the NEASC progress that they're making at the high school. So Megan.
Hi, everyone. So this past Thursday, we had our NEASC liaison visit. Francis Kennedy is our liaison that works to support us through the NEASC process. So he came, he met with a group as an administrative team at the high school, then met with our steering committee, and then also met with our self-reflection committee, and ended the day with a faculty meeting, reviewing the standards with staff so everyone is aware of the work that we're going to be doing, and then looking at our timeline and how we progress through our evidence collection, getting feedback from parents and students and staff, and then it wraps up, well, this portion of NEASC wraps up with our collaborative conference, which is 2 days in April, which is a smaller committee. So if you've been through a NEASC review or had any experience with a NEASC accreditation process, typically a team might come with a larger number. We have about 5 folks that come into the building for the collaborative conference in April. They've received our report that we're going to work on from now until sometime around March. And that's our self-reflection report. And then they come with that report in hand. They come to the school, they walk around, they stay over a night, and they collect data on how we're doing and continue to inform our accreditation process. So Fran was very impressed with the work that we've done to date. I want to thank Nick Torres, who who is leading our NEASC work, who's our social studies curriculum instructional leader, and Julie Gavoni, who has also been supporting Nick through that process and began the process last year with Nick at their first NEASC meeting. So all is looking great. We feel like we're a little bit ahead of the process, and we've really got our ducks in a row and ready to move forward. So yesterday, during a portion of our professional development time, our teachers, again, were reviewing the standards 1 through 4, which standard 1 is learning culture. Standard 2 is delving into student learning. Standard 3 is about our professional practices. And standard 4 is our learning support and how we support students in their learning. And we worked with teachers to gather evidence, things that they have done this year or last year that support those standards and collecting that information. So we're in a really good place with NEASC. Our next step is NEASC requires us to survey students, parents, and staff. So that will be our next step coming up in the days ahead.
Thanks, Megan. So I will say, even though this is my only third week on the job, but when I joined the team, Megan and her team was like a well-oiled machine around NEASC. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of evidence to gather and organization, and kudos to all of you, because they just brought me right into the thick of it, and we rolled up our sleeves, and they're doing a lot of great work. And so you guys are very well organized, and everything seems to be on par. So great job. All right. So moving on.
For the people who are tuning in from home and watching, what is the benefit to Weston for getting this accreditation, or why go through this whole process?
So I think NEASC is a wonderful process. I think that it asks us to self-reflect. I think we're doing that all of the time, but NEASC gives us a really unique opportunity to have folks from outside come in, and people who are part of education, and they may be from different areas. We talked to Fran about who may be some of the members that are visiting us, and we talked about some of the schools from what they call Metro West outside of the Boston area, who are very comparable to the education we provide in Weston, but also might have a little bit of a different lens and might have different feedback for us that we could also learn and grow from. I think it's also a great opportunity. We have an advisory, which is an awesome program here, but how can we strengthen some of our programs and make them even better? So I just think it's a great opportunity to look at the standards, reflect on what we're doing, reflect on what we're doing well, and then also with those standards in mind, look at our areas for growth too.
If I can add, just to kind of put it in perspective, I think this will be my 4th NEASC. Oh God. That's how we got the science wing, was NEASC. They commend you on things, and they also recommend things. And way back when we didn't have adequate science facilities, the space, there were a lot of issues. When they put things like that in a report, it sort of validates and provides a blueprint for what a school needs to do. So that's why it's so important. Also, it's important when you apply to college that the school is accredited.
That's a great point. As we're looking to go into the big facility update project, are there specific areas we can ask the accreditation committee to pay attention to, or does that come out as an innate part of the process that they do that might guide us in some of the recommendations we can do for our own renovation?
That's standard 5. So when we work in conjunction with our folks in facilities to look at how our facilities measure up and how it impacts our ability to deliver instruction at a high level.
This is continuous improvement at its best, right? We are just in that field of constant feedback and reflection. So when we have critical partners like this that are unbiased, that come in and give us some really good feedback, we definitely want to take it and run. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about that ongoing continuous improvement when we transition into the next kind of district updates. So if there's no more questions for Megan, I'm going to actually transition to the next chunk of the conversation, which is around some of the district committee updates. Bernadette, David, you guys are good? Okay. So you may have been hearing since I arrived, we've got some pretty aggressive projects happening this school year specific to curriculum and assessment. And so the first is the state of Connecticut has, since last year, actually the year before, there are new state guidelines that the state of Connecticut the Department of Education has put forth to ensure that all districts, all public schools in the state of Connecticut adopt one of 5 scientific research-based, evidence-based reading curricula / programs to ensure that all districts' core curriculum is aligned to the science of reading. You received a handout in conjunction with today's meeting. And I'm going to just drag this document over. Can you see that? Yes, thumbs up. No? No. How about now? Can you see it now?
Not yet.
Not yet. Hang on. How about now? Nope.
Yep. I
Got
think
that?
Now it's here. Yeah.
So let's see if this is a little bit better. So back over a year ago, the state of Connecticut charged the members of the state of Connecticut in the literacy field to put together a committee that included various literacy experts, the state staff, educational leaders, and they were expected to look at a variety of programs and curricula that were aligned to the following areas of reading instruction, which was based on the science of reading. That's oral language, phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, rapid automatic name or letter name fluency, and reading comprehension. And so from that work over a year ago, this state committee then provided guidelines to all public schools in the state of Connecticut to adopt one of the programs that are on this list based on the guidelines. They reviewed 25 different curricula. They had a variety of critical literacy areas aligned to the science of reading, and that is what the guidelines are based off of. With those guidelines, in addition to the 5 programs that were released, the 5 programs are there that every public school has to adopt pre-K to 3, is the requirement that the school districts adopt one of those 5 beginning July 1 of 2023. And so we are now in the process of, we've built a district literacy committee, which includes various internal constituents of reading consultants, principal leaders, teachers in the pre-K to 3 area, district leaders as well, to review the guidelines, understand the background on why we got where we are right now, and also, very importantly, to audit the current status of where we are relative to resources and curricula supports outlined from the guidelines that the state has provided to districts, and also to review these areas, these 5 core programs that you actually can review on EdReports. EdReports.org has all of these programs and the ratings that that the teams reviewed, and why they are most closely aligned to the science of reading, and why they were made it to the approved list based on the state of Connecticut. I see 6 here, but they kept saying 5. So, but there's 6 according to the bullets here. So part of the district committee, as I mentioned, is to not take this work lightly. We really need to ensure that we understand all the various components of all of these curricula and decide which one of these would be the best fit for our district. So that we not only are aligned to the science of reading, but that we're meeting the needs of all learners in our district. And we're also really valuing some of the resources that we currently have in the district and how they best align to our current teaching and instruction practices, as well as any how the current programs that we have align to the core curricular resources that the state is adopting. So that's part of our work as a district team. We will begin that process on October 20th as a district team. And then from there, we will be partnering with our Regional Education Service Center, which is CES, to help us guide through this process and make our final decision, which is required by the state to be presented by December of this year. This will have some budgetary implications, not only from a resource standpoint, but also from professional development standpoint. We are still exploring or kind of diving deep into the guidelines around some options for us as a district, whether or not, even though we have a plan that is presented to the state by July 1, is there an option to do a scaffolding implementation or, a 2-year or 3-year rollout, or do we have to adopt and implement day 1 of the following school year? So that is still being discussed. Any questions around, one other piece. Within the guidelines as well, not only is the curriculum adoption one of the priorities, but also the assessment components of the guidelines as well. So there is a list of approved research-based universal screening assessments for reading in grades K through 3. Fortunately, we in Weston do have one of those assessment tools, pre-K to 3. It's DIBELS 8. We will be exploring whether or not we need additional resources to help us analyze and collect that data on a more efficient basis, and to ensure that the teachers are able to utilize those assessments on a more higher level than maybe what we're using right now. And I would assume that that's going to help us also support a lot of our district goals, not only from an overall perspective, but as well as a subgroup perspective, and help some of the goals that Tracy and her team has as well. That is part of the reason why some of these assessments have been approved on the state list. Part of the reason that those assessments are on this list are to provide appropriate grades in identifying in whole, but also for students that may be at risk for dyslexia and other reading related learning disabilities. Okay, I can give this to you digitally as well if you want in the chat actually, because this is a really good resource for, because there's hyperlinks embedded within it. So if you wanted to dive into the resources that the state provides on the public side, you're able to do that. I'm just going to put it in the chat. Any questions?
Yeah, I love the idea of us going through what we already do so well in comparison to these programs and then figuring out, what fits our population best and also what things we can do better. Any thought about the students who are in grades, let's say 4, 5, 6, so still working on reading? If we identify areas in these reading programs that are spaces where we haven't done as much work as we possibly could, any thought about bringing additional reading or focused reading interventions to the other students?
Yeah, it's a great question. So those of you that I've spoken to since I've arrived, I'm a real big believer in coherence and vertical articulation, not only because it supports professional development for staff, but also the student experience when they are going through a K through or pre-K through 8th grade program to say, helps with common language and vocabulary. It also helps with common instructional routines and what the expectations are. So especially in some of those transition grades that we know in both reading and math, we have some dips or decline in achievement. It helps build some continuity no matter how many transitions a district has. So when we explore these curriculum resources, I've been very clear to the district literacy committee members that I've already spoken to that we don't want to just look at a pre-K to 3 program. We really do want to see if there's an option for us that meets our needs pre-K to 8 and what that looks like. I don't have an answer, but that is part of our work as we embark in this journey. is to really look at a resource that provides as much continuity and vertical alignment and articulation as possible. It also helps with curriculum development, right? So that if we want to look at opportunities for staff to work collaboratively together, they can work across grade levels. It's not isolated. So the more we can do that, I think the better resource we have. Great question.
Do we have any thoughts as to whether or not the state is going to follow this up with a next tier where they require specific things for the next age group or beyond? Have they made any noises or have you heard anything?
Yeah, it's a great question. On my end, I haven't heard that yet, but I don't know if any of the principals that have also, or Tracy, that you've been involved in some of the additional conversations before I joined in on Weston, whether or not they've talked about that. I think some of the research specifically is really on those foundational literacy skills and some of the data that they're seeing relative to some of the components that are not present in some curricula that districts are currently using. So for many districts, students are performing well, but not all. And so why is that is the question, right? And so now that there's been research out there around the components of pre-K to 3 literacy, how aligned are we with some of the research and the resources that we are using in the classrooms for all students? That's the precipice of this.
And once we pick the program that we think might work best for our students, is there an opportunity for us to talk to some of the surrounding districts to see if they also came to the same conclusion? So if they've used a different program or they're going a different direction, to, I don't know, check in, is that useful or?
Yeah, I think there's different perspectives or different philosophies, I should say, when people start to do that. Number one, you're never comparing apples to apples whenever you're asking those types of questions. For sure, I think having conversations and gathering information so that we can make our best judgment based on our students is definitely something I would never prohibit us from doing. And in fact, next week, not only on the 20th, but also at the end of the month and into the beginning of November, the team will be exploring these individual resources in detail with the vendors, and other districts will be present. I can tell you, however, that most of our surrounding districts that are in the same DERG are in the same boat, where we're all going to be needing to require to adopt either new assessments and or new curriculum and programs, because it's public information. You can go online and you could see ed reports and you could look at the tools that are not approved based on the Science of Reading guidelines, and what we have versus what is not even on the approved list. So it's going to require us to think differently. It is going to require us to ask a lot of questions so that we're very comfortable in adopting one of these resources for our students in Weston. So the work is critical and I don't take it lightly. And I'm really excited that the team we have, Tracy and her team, is going to join us. We've got administrators on our team. We've got teachers on our team. We've got literacy consultants. We've got teachers that have been engaged in some of the research through their own professional growth through university partners that they've been working with too on the team. So it's a really diverse team, and I'm excited for us to come together and figure this out together. It's a great problem solving practice. So it's going to be exciting to see what we all land on.
Tina, so when there's a new curriculum or new requirements, it generally means we have to switch out some of our textbooks and other learning resources. Do we get any assistance from the state on this, since this is a state mandate, or this is a cost that we pick up in full on our own?
I'll give you one option to give an answer to that.
Yeah.
It is an unfunded mandate.
Yeah.
The districts are required to allocate in their own budgets the resources that they want to adopt. I know that we will be engaging in those budget conversations very soon. And I want to be as specific and close to the actual request as possible. And so I don't even, the variance around the resources in order to adopt one of these 6, I don't have an answer yet, but I hope by the end of the month I will, because we'll be able to gather a lot of information when we actually meet with the vendors and have a conversation around the number of sections that we currently have in the district. And if we were to adopt it pre-K to 3, maybe year 1, and if it is a program that we want to adopt beyond 3rd grade, then what would that look like for year 2 or year 3 and beyond?
Unfunded mandates as usual. The unfunded part and the
Mhm.
mandate, actually, they kind of go hand in hand in Connecticut, it seems.
Yes, yes, unfortunately. All right. Any other questions on the state guidelines for the literacy curricula and programs? Okay. Can you see my agenda screen, or I have to reshare? Reshare, right? Let's see. Okay. So next, just 3 more district committees that will be running simultaneously with the literacy district committee. When I joined the team on September 19th, I was part of that Board of Education meeting that talked about some of the progress from last school year. And it was very clear to me that we did have some areas of growth, specifically in mathematics, and we really wanted to focus some of our attention on that. Luckily, just like NEASC that Megan talked about when it comes to critical friends and looking at feedback, we too will be engaging with our Tri-State Consortium. I've actually not been a part of a review process with Tri-State. With NEASC I have, but not with Tri-State. So I'm actually very excited for some of the feedback that we're going to gather from Tri-State. And the district Tri-State Steering Committee focused around math. We will be gathering by the end of the month, and we're going to be going to a training on the 25th as a team, as our kickoff kind of conference. And the focus for our Tri-State visit will be specifically in grades 5 through 9, because we know that we've got some areas of growth specific to the transition grades, as well as focusing on students with disabilities. Lisa and I did talk about different options for our Tri-State visit. And given the priorities also with literacy and pre-K to 3, we have really decided that we're going to focus grades 5 through 9 in math, because we know that we're very fortunate in 5th grade. That's when we start to departmentalize the teaching assignments in 5th grade. So we're able to really hone in with our 5th grade math teachers. And then obviously when you get to 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, we also, have departmentalized teachers, so we can really zoom in within the math instruction and the math curriculum with our math teachers. And Megan and I did speak as well. We wanted to make sure that we also balance the workload of our 9th grade teachers, because I wanted to be mindful of NEASC and the work of NEASC. And we were able to consult with Tri-State as well. And so we'll be able to overlap some of the work that Megan is doing with 9th grade math teachers, in addition to the Tri-State Consortium. So I wanted to make sure it wasn't extra, but it was in conjunction with. So I feel very confident, and I hope, Megan, you agree. I think we talked about it before we committed to that 9th grade year coming into the mix, but I really wanted to see if we could focus in on some of those transition grades. So I wanted to make sure we had at least 2 transition years in there. So really excited about that. And then last, I forgot to mention, we had over the summer, as most districts do, we do engage in summer literacy and summer math programming. And so I do have updates around our participation for summer literacy in grades K through 8. I'll give you some of the participant numbers, as well as the number of days that they read, which is really encouraging. And then next year, we want to also up the ante with our summer math challenges as well. And we want to formalize that a little bit more, so we could actually provide some data and evidence around how our students are engaging in some of our summer math challenge work that we want to do. This past year, students in grades K through 2 read a total of 4,789 books. Woohoo! And our students in grades 3 through 5 read 1,096 books. And In the middle grades, the Weston Public Library provided us with data around the number of days that they read, which was over 1,043. That was the number of days that they read. And at the high school level, we have 65 days that they read. There's always a little bit of, when you're looking at data for high school students, gathering that data sometimes can be difficult. So we're going to work on trying to really kind of hone in on some of our data around summer reading, because we know that summer reading and summer slide is real, and we want to make sure that kids are continuously reading in the summer. And that's true with math as well. So really looking at some of the programming that we've offered last summer in math, we want to make sure that it's developmentally appropriate, it's exciting, it's engaging, and kids are actually practicing some of their problem solving and critical thinking skills before they enter the next school year. Any questions around some of the literacy and math updates?
For the math review, the 5 through 9, what kinds of aspects of the curriculum or student performance are going to be part of the Tri-State review?
Yeah, it's a good question. So right now, the committee is going to really look at how our Tier 1 curriculum meets the needs of all learners, specifically in those transition grades and with students with disabilities. So the evidence that we want to really look at is we want to do some curriculum. We want to look at some curriculum review and curriculum feedback, as well as how does lesson planning and implementation of that curriculum seamlessly transition from planning to implementation.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the last two. So we are also going to be gathering a professional development and teacher evaluation committee. I think this was in existence before I arrived, but we're going to revisit and rekindle that committee. It will help us plan for our professional development days so that they are specific to the action steps that the school improvement plans have outlined, that the principals have outlined with their schools, so that everything that we do from the district level to from the school level is in alignment with each other. And that if we need to plan for outside presenters or do any type of professional development related to action steps and goals, that everything is in alignment with each other, that there's no one-off, right? We want to make sure that we're all kind of moving in the same direction, and the professional development that we provide to our staff is in alignment to our district goals, which is in alignment to our school goals. So that's going to be some of their work, making sure that when we identify professional development and learning opportunities for staff, it's in conjunction with our school and district goals and the evidence that we hope to see. And then the final update is around assessment. So we've been talking a lot around continuous improvement, and we've been talking a lot, you'll see more on Monday, around the alignment of district goals and school goals and teacher goals. And so when we look at assessment, there's a variety of data points that we look at, right? We look at quantitative and we look at qualitative all the time, and we do it on a regular basis. One update that we want to ensure moving into this coming school year is we know that parents receive NWA for assessment reports for both math and reading. We've printed those and we've mailed them home in the fall, and we've also done that in the spring. This year, we are not going to be mailing home the winter reports. That is intentional because we know that we use our fall assessment data to create an individualized program for kids between the fall and the spring. And we look at a variety of student work and a variety of data points. And we want to make sure that that winter data includes a conversation with parents, and it's not just a standalone assessment, that we interweave it with other assessments and we include a conversation with parents around student performance and student achievement, in addition to having a conversation around any programming changes that need to be made as a result of that data. So that's a minor adjustment moving into the school year. And moving forward, we hope next year that potentially we can digitize some of these reports and we can provide some of these updates on a digital level and not be mailing things home. But that's a long-term goal, and it's not something that we have an update for you at this time. Okay, any questions on those?
It sounds like there's a lot of work around making our enrichment reporting more robust and healthier. So it's a better reflection of the student learning in each individual category. So you talk about the NWEA and that score and the other factors that also might be similar measures, right? Have we given any thought to thinking about connecting different data sources together? So if we have social emotional data and linking that to our math or linking that to our ELA so that we can kind of get to the whys a little bit more, even qualitative stuff as well.
Yeah, it's so good. So triangulation of data is something that we're very fortunate in Weston to have a tool like Tableau that's connected to our student information system. So we can really look at a variety of, attendance reports and attendance data. If we're able to import any climate data or survey data that we've had into our student information system, that helps us really create a robust conversation around multiple data points. So we can ask more of the whys, right? Those 5 whys around the root cause of some of the rationale for things that are working really well and some of the areas that we need to improve on. I also think as much as the state guidelines sometimes cause a little bit of a hiccup or a headache for districts, one thing I will say is that, housing data can get very overwhelming. And so making sure that we reduce the number of opportunities that we have data that is housed in a repository that is not accessible is something we want to try to move away from. So making sure that we have data that is housed in a platform that is easily accessible so that we can import it into the PowerSchool, which then can be transformed using Tableau, is something we also want to really be mindful of when we're looking at assessments. So we're doing that in the sciences this year. We're really exploring a more standardized assessment tool that we can analyze science data as well. So we can gather it more efficiently and easily and then import it into our one house of data analysis so that we can start to put layers of data on top of each other and really create a story around data for the teachers and for the students so we can have a more robust conversation. Data analysis and gathering of data is always such a challenge, I think, for districts. It's not, and we're very fortunate here that we have a tool like Tableau. Most districts don't. The question always becomes, how do we more efficiently get that information into the data warehouse so we can put layers of it on top of each other? And I think adding behavioral data such as attendance and any other behavioral information that we enter into the student information system is going to really create a more robust conversation. So that is a long-term goal for sure.
That's great. And I know you said that we're using the data so that we can make sure each individual student's academic plan reflects their most area of most need. Are we looking at the data, this whole picture by subgroups as well, and in addition to grade levels and making sure we're not missing any pockets of students?
Yeah, I think you'll see on Monday specifically where we're really zooming in more so on our subgroup, right? Our subgroup in Weston is students with disabilities. In other districts, there may be a variety of subgroups, right? Where I came from, we had about 5 different subgroups. So you'll see that our goal this school year as a district and individually at each school, and even down at the teacher level, we are really zooming in on some of the overarching goals, but then zooming in specifically on growth and achievement for students with disabilities as well. Okay, so next meeting, Megan and I have been working with the curriculum instruction leaders to help prepare for next year's program of study. Moving into next meeting in November, that will be a focus of our November meeting, which will be around any new course proposals that Megan and her team will be proposing to the board, as well as any courses that they will be either putting on an alternate schedule, or if they will be removing from the program of studies. If there's additional, Bernadette, I don't know how you guys go with any additional action items or topics. You and I typically will convene and talk about it. And if there's anything additional that Lisa would like us to include in next year's topics, by all means, I would welcome the feedback.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Bernie, I don't know if this is the right place for me to ask a question for next year's curriculum, but has there been any consideration for more tech? Really, in my vernacular, would be vocational, but I've been told vocational is not the proper term in 2022. But the spirit of my question is there any sort of movement or interest in looking at providing some more vocational style classes at the high school level for next year or sometime in the near future?
Megan, you want to jump in?
Sure. David, you're speaking my language. I think right now we're definitely looking at Project Lead the Way and how we can enhance that. So we're really reflecting kind of what comes next for students on that pathway. Every time you talk about adding vocational programs, it's about resources, it's about staffing, and how do you build those programs without degrading other programs? So I think it's a larger conversation, but I think we are also looking to ways we can engage all learners and all post-secondary goals for students as our world changes and evolves, right? So more and more I talk to folks out in business. Some students many students, the majority of students are certainly going on to college, and we certainly may have students who may take a gap year. They may go into a more vocational career, and we want to make sure that we are reflecting the current needs and hopes of students.
If I can add one thing, though, that we do have to keep in mind is, and Tina says it well when she says we are a school system. We are not a system of schools. So when we look at any kind of trajectory, we have to look at it through the eye also of K-12 and through the eye, quite frankly, of academic return on investment. We have a certain amount that we have to look at, and Megan is exactly right. Sometimes it would require certain kinds of resources. And my big thing is what, especially at the high school, what is the evidence that we need this? What are the students wanting? We don't want to just, this sounds great, but how does this relate to the mission? How does it relate to access? How does it relate to the overall facilities, the overall budget that we have? Not to keep talking budget, but this is a big transition year for our budget, if we remember, because the ESSER funds are disappearing. So we have to be very planful with any kind of approach or tweak that we have as we move forward and we look at new courses, both at the high school and the overall program, quite frankly, K-12. So I think that there's, as Megan said, it's a bigger conversation, and it will take some planning and really thinking about it. And it also plays into, quite frankly, the facilities and what Bernie was talking about earlier.
And I think NEASC will do a good job of surveying students in terms of how our current programs are meeting their needs. So there are some questions around that. And we also, at being a small school in a small district, I think that we can also benefit from looking at some area partnerships as well.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that too. I mean, I value Project Lead the Way, and I think they have a really good reputation. However, they're not the only partnership or opportunity that districts can engage in to really enhance the STEAM or STEM experience. And so, Megan, myself, and some of our curriculum instructional leaders will be exploring additional opportunities, as well as partnerships, like Megan said, where you can actually enhance your curriculum through alternate pathways and avenues that may be more cost effective for districts.
And what's interesting, it just reminds me not to go too much of a bird walk. So we talk about what is the benefit of NEASC, and the benefit of NEASC over time here was we have an incredible, quite frankly, STEM facility at the high school. That was a result of NEASC. And Project Lead the Way actually was a consequence of one of our tri-state studies that happened in the area of pre-engineering and STEM. So it's great that when we look at the NEASC work we're doing and we look at the tri-state, work that we're going to be doing. These also open up opportunities for us to broaden what are the possibilities, because it's sort of a critical friends group of some of the best educators in the area.
You'll probably not, this won't be the first and last time I bring this up. I'll probably bring it up again, but I just wanted to add, is there a mechanism by which we're going to be able to get feedback from our students? My concern with asking them how what we have is working out for them, it's not a broad enough question. I think the question really has to be, what would you like for us to have? What do we have that's not very interesting to you? And I think one of the data points is, I can't remember the name of the class exactly, but there was the new high school class, I believe, for this fall or maybe for the spring. It has
Sustainable Solutions. Was it
Which
the
one?
Sustainable Solutions
Yes.
class?
Yes. So I remember talking about it in the spring. I said I'd like to enroll. I don't ever remember seeing how to get enrolled, but how is the turnout, the interest in that course?
We have really high interest in that course. And I think that, some of what students are choosing definitely is an indicator of interest. I think that the real world kind of problem-based curriculum that they have in that class is really appealing to students. And we also have to, a whole scale look at our program of studies. And I think, to your point, David, it's one thing to ask kids, how are we doing? It's another thing to ask kids, what do you wish we had that we don't, maybe, right? And so, while certainly NEASC is one way to do that, it's not the only way. And we're going to continue to evaluate our programs over time. I think that when we look at program development, you're looking at 3 to 5 year plans, right? To really survey students, be super thoughtful about it, look at how times are changing and courses are changing. We saw in the arts, for example, an increased interest in animation. And that certainly came out of kind of pop culture and Pixar and, all those really cool professional career avenues for kids to take. Sometimes I talk to folks out in careers in terms of TV and audio production, and folks are hiring and they say, we want people with certifications, and in addition to their college education. So are there certifications that over time that we can start to provide and offer to kids? So it's really a long-term conversation, but really reflecting on, the world of 2022 and beyond, and how we can support students and where they want to go.
Yeah, then to that point, as you said, if it's a this is not something that's going to happen quick. So we're talking 3 to 5 years. I'll be even more persistent with bringing this up every meeting, right? Because what it really means is that we have to start now.
Yep.
So yeah, I would just, I'll bring it up again, but I'm a big proponent of really looking at areas that we may have interest. We spend so much time preparing our students for college, and the reality of it is we may have some number of students, and we don't even know what the number is, that would be better served with either a leap gap year or a vocational skill or whatever the case may be. So I feel like that's a very underserved, potentially underserved population today that we should be looking at. And being that it takes 3 to 5 years, we should start looking at it now, and maybe with the lens of what more of our regular courses do we offer that are low, that don't have high attendance, that we should be looking at making changes in.
Yeah, all part of the conversation for sure. And I would just add one more thing when it comes to STEM career fields that are declining, especially with women. The more we can expose students early, you talk about the 3-year 5 plan. It's not just at the high school. It starts much earlier when we expose children to different fields like this to gain the interest on what they can and what's possible for them. So I agree, and I agree with you. And I think that it's going to require us to, like Megan said, when we think strategically about plans, though, it's going to require an opportunity for kids at a much earlier age, which will then allow us to increase the courses that we have at the upper end as well. Yeah. Okay, Bernie?
Yeah, just one more thing to throw out there too with it. I wonder if there's other opportunities, maybe through clubs and less formal than creating courses to explore some of these things. Because sometimes when there's a grade attached to it, it can destroy some of the joy or the fear of trying something completely new for fear of failure with transcripts and things like that. If there's some lower stakes ways to get involved in some of these activities.
Yeah, agreed. After
And that-
school programming is for sure.
Yeah, and that could be something where it's
Mhm.
introduced at the middle school level.
Right.
And we talk about capturing these children at an early age to see what their interests are. So, potentially figuring out who locally could come in, who has a wood shop, out somewhere who can bring some stuff into the middle school and offer an after school program, who can, that might be a great way to start gauging interest as well, because, if we can do after school programs, which also I think are funded by the student, by the families who enroll their kids, it's an interesting way to potentially give kids access to things that aren't in the curriculum today,
Mhm.
gauge interest and start at the middle school level, so that when it potentially becomes curriculum based at the high school, you have a identified group of students who have an interest. And I think it's a good idea to see if there's a way to start this at the middle school, after school, if not during school.
Right.
You'll hear from me again on this topic, I'm sure.
Okay, Bernie, that concludes I know we're early, which is a good thing. So we talked about next steps for topics. We will keep increasing those topics for next time, but we'll have a more formal presentation around new course proposals and or the program of studies as we get to the November meeting.
That sounds good. Does anybody have anything else before we wrap up? Sounds good. Then if I can have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
So moved. We're good. Good to see everyone. Have a good rest of the week. Bye.